Brought to you by Charity Mobile, the phone company that supports life and family. 5% of your monthly plan price goes to your favorite charity. Buy the way you believe at CharityMobile.com and use promo code TRADITION.
While I don't enjoy necessarily covering secular politics on this channel, it has been nice in a way to cover that. The moral questions are a little more cut and dry. You understand when you're dealing with factors outside the church trying to crush the church, or even the bishops having money waved in front of their faces and them acquiescing and selling the faith out. That stuff's a little more cut and dry than stories like what I have for you today. There's this problem, recurring problem, and I usually cover this during Lent, but here we are more than a month before Lent 2025 starts. And this recurring problem that usually pops up during Lent is that bishops and priests, for whatever reason, typically in Europe, decide that they're going to put blasphemous art on display in their cathedrals, basilicas, and their parishes. They do this because they think they're being pious. The most notorious one, I'll just say what it was, I won't show a picture because it's that bad, was of a picture of a pig's heart with a crown of thorns. Why the bishop in this question thought that was a good idea to put up in Lent in his parish, I don't know. There was another one of a very, we'll say James Martin-esque, where this wicked priest decided to depict our Lord engaged in disgusting activities. I don't know why these people think this is a good idea. And in this case of this story today, I still don't know why they think this is a good idea. But this story comes to us from the German, more moderate version of LifeSite News called Kath.net. They're the equivalent of like LifeSite in Germany. And they give us this headline: Excitement about designs for new wayside shrines for the Rosary Way to the Maria Eck Pilgrimage Church. This story didn't even get my attention when I first saw it on Kath.net because it didn't sound like it was that big of a deal. The way they phrase that makes it sound, oh, people are excited about a Rosary pilgrimage to a parish. Great, I'm happy for them. Except that's not what this is about at all. Again, why is it that some men believe they need to depict sacred things in an impure way? And the answer to that is unfortunately fairly straightforward. Impurity corrupts the mind and it corrupts the soul. This is why you go to confession on a regular basis if you struggle with purity, which, by the way, according to most confessors, is most Catholics. Something like 90% of men and 80% of women confess impurity-related sins all the time. Weekly or every other week, go to confession on a very regular basis. Stay close to that sacrament if you can. And maybe if you're a priest watching this and you've struggled with whether or not to offer more confession times, make yourself available for confession more often. That you'll be helping these souls who show up to go to confession, who struggle with these sins, see a long line for confession, and turn around and leave. Because sometimes they don't have the ability to stand there for 45 minutes in line. And please, if you're ahead of somebody in line for confession, keep your confession brief. Please, just name and kind of the sins. You don't need to turn it into a longer session unless your priest demands it. That having been said, why do people do this? Why do these men in positions of authority in the church turn sacred things into unholy things? Why do they blaspheme the way they do? By depicting things about the way you're about to hear. Kath.net has a very restrained way of reporting these things. And in a way, that's not usually a good thing. But try not to let your imagination run wild with this one. From the article, quote, a rosary path leads to the Maria Eck Pilgrimage Church above Siegsdorf in Bavaria, Diocese of Munich-Freising. The mysteries of the rosary are depicted on wayside shrines. The wayside shrines are over 50 years old and need to be replaced in a report on the Bavarian Broadcasting Corporation's Abendschau der Süd program on January 10th. Some designs were shown. The design for the coronation of Mary caused a stir. Mary is depicted as a fat, naked woman. This design led to protests from Catholics to the Trondheim district, which commissioned the new shrines. The design for the depiction of the Assumption of Mary also shows Mary as a woman without clothes. She leaves everything behind her, including her clothes, according to the Bavarian radio report. The selections of designs should be completed by February. The images will be cast in bronze. The new wayside shrines could be ready in May. End quote. Straightforward reporting, right? Yeah. Who thought that was a good idea? Now, some people will say, well, it's sacred art. You'll sometimes see depictions of Our Lady nursing, part of her chest exposed for nursing. Yes, and some context is important with that, including, we'll call it cultural context. We live in a time where impurity has soaked the culture. Our culture is in a wash in impurity. Again, priests will tell you 90% of men and 80% of Catholic women, give or take, will confess to, we'll call them habitual sins, and sins related to the habitual sin in question involving internet material. Catch my meaning. Trying not to cause scandal here or avoid using certain words our hosts definitely don't like people using. But people, apparently at 90 and 80%, respectively, according to priests, will tell you that that's what is most commonly confessed. And when you have a culture like that, depicting holy things in, we'll call it more intimate detail like that may not be the best idea. People's minds go to really disturbing places very easily. This is why you'll see this sometimes in social media posts. People will post a meme or something, or you'll see an advertisement for jewelry that maybe shows a little bit more skin than might be normally prudent, and people will comment on that. People's minds go to these places immediately. We don't live in a time where innocent thoughts abound. But there's also another thing here. Why would you depict Our Lady as obese? Yes, trust me, as someone who has struggled with his weight his whole life, yes, I can tell you for a fact, there are people out there who, no matter what they do, how healthy they eat, and how much they exercise as much as they're physically able to, they carry extra body fat. They carry a lot of it. Yes, and there are glandular issues out there. But in most cases, that's not the case. And the church used to be very straightforward with this stuff. This stuff is the stuff of sin. And yes, this is one of those sins that is really hard to overcome. Again, I know from experience. But why would you depict the Virgin Mary that way? It sort of implies, theologically, if you see a picture of an obese person in theologically in like sacred art, that's usually an implication of the sin of gluttony. Why would you depict the Virgin Mary that way? Why would you depict the Virgin Mary without clothing? And yet, this has caused a stir, and so hopefully I'll report to you an update here in the next few days saying that they've rethought this and thought maybe we shouldn't do this. I don't expect to see that happen. Because at the end of the day, a story like this, a lot of these people will believe, hey, this is getting negative press, but there's no such thing as negative press. All press is good press. So let's keep this going because it will be advertisement for our little pilgrimage site. When in reality, anybody with a functioning sense of faith will not want to set foot anywhere near that place. Nobody wants to go on pilgrimage and see blasphemous art. And some, I'm sure, will say I'm overreacting to this. But after a while, every year during Lent, bracing for the inevitable story or 5 of these kinds of art depictions in European cathedrals, you stop thinking that this stuff is just a coincidence and should be tolerated. You start getting a little angry about it. So, this is where I ask you, am I overreacting? That, it's okay to depict Our Lady without clothes and obese as part of the crowning because she's in heaven, you will have left behind everything on earth, all yada, yada, yada. Despite the fact that you will never see that in actual traditional sacred art, or even modern sacred art. A lot of stuff where the art is not good because it just lacks a lot of whatever it was that made sacred art traditionally beautiful. A lot of it, like Rupnik is a great example of this. To his credit, I have never seen Marco Rupnik depict our Lord and Our Lady in that way. Now, maybe I just missed a piece of his somewhere, but it's sad when you get compared negatively to Marco Rupnik. That's all I'm saying. What do you think of this? Am I overreacting? Let me know in the comments, please. And please pray for whoever made the decision to create that piece of art in Germany. Let me know in the comments what you think. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.